Hey, thank you so much for joining us at our Crosspoint Church podcast. Now, if you're new to our podcast or maybe new to our church in general, we're just a bunch of messed up people who don't have it all together, running after a heavenly leader who loves us and meets us right where we are. We hope this message encourages you, builds your faith, and strengthens your confidence as you continue down this journey of what it means to know and follow Jesus. Enjoy this message.
Wow. How fun was that? Man, that was awesome. For some of us, that used to be our song right there. We were like, man, I'm just as bad as I used to be. And you've actually been changing. You've actually been experiencing some things that have been taking you to new places, maybe even for the first time, which is what is so cool every time we go through these journey experiences. So, hey, welcome to Crosspoint. Really excited to have you with us this weekend. My name's Curt. And if you are here with us for the first time, tuning in for the first time, we realize there's so many places you could be. You got a lot of options. We consider it an honor that you would be with us this weekend. And let's make some noise for those online this weekend. We got people across the city, state, nation, even our world. Excited to have you with us. You have caught us on the last week, if you're here for the first time, of a 7-week series. And today we're going to kind of be punctuating what we've been talking about for the last few weeks. And the kind of the big idea is we've been looking at how what it looks like to apprentice under the person of Jesus. What does it mean to be with Jesus, to become more like him, and then to actually do some of the things he does, to experience the things that he experienced in his life. And one of those things actually happened last weekend. We had some people that stepped into the waters of baptism, following Jesus into that. That was super, super exciting. And if you didn't have a chance to see some of these baptisms, we just want to recap that so we can celebrate that here for a moment. Man, how fun is that? Let's congratulate all of our partners here who took that step. Man, so exciting. If that was a part of your journey, we are just so honored to be a part of that. Now, a couple other quick mentions. I want to say thank you real quick to all of you who participated in or have been participating in the food drive. And so let's just give a shout out to those who participated in that. So cool. And there's been so much food coming in and just trying to meet human needs. The cool part of this is this was all orchestrated by a student that was raised here at Crosspoint. He's now a young adult in the work world, and he started a nonprofit for this. In fact, it happens to be the son of one of our hosts, Eric. And he just has a burden for serving the community, and we had the opportunity to partner with him. So there's still the opportunity this weekend. If you have food that you'd like to bring in, that's ending this weekend, and that is all going to food banks around our area here. Now, we have two other opportunities starting this weekend, kind of in the same vein. We just love blessing families, especially around the Christmas season. And so Spread Some Cheer is back. You guys excited about Spread Some Cheer? Yes. We get, this is something we've been doing for like 14, 15 years and counting. And so there's two ways to participate in this. One is through the giving tree. There are gift tags on the wall in the Commons, and you can take those. Those are attached to a specific child that perhaps may not have a great Christmas if we don't come through. And so these are opportunities for us to provide some clothing, some toys. And so you can take those and then return them to the campus here by December 7th. They have to be back by December 7th because they're going into homes like 2 days later. So you can take those, bring those back over the next few weeks. Great opportunity. And then we also have meal boxes here this weekend. And this is a great way. We've been serving the community. I think we're up to like 140, 150 meals we're going to be providing that will feed anywhere from 8 to 12 people. And the needs are great. Every year the needs are great. They're even greater this year. And so many of you, it's not a problem to take one box, maybe 2 boxes, and bring them back on December 14th. This is going to be return weekend. But for some of us, you might want to use this as an invite. Maybe you've got someone that you are looking to invite to Crosspoint. And, instead of saying, hey, why don't you come sit in a service with me? Maybe it's, hey, would you serve the community with me? Let's go shopping. Let's provide some things that will provide for needs. And then invite them on the 14th to come with you for that return weekend for the meal boxes. Or maybe it's, having your small group say, hey, we're going to take X number of boxes, fill those together. And I just think that any number of things, when people start thinking of how do we do things in community together to serve the community, I think God gets really happy about that. So lots of opportunities to do that. If you're tuning in online, you can scan this QR code and you can either donate and somebody else will do the shopping for you, or you can download the list and you can go do shopping and bring the food here as well. So cool. I mean, it's such a great season we're heading into, and you guys already kicked it off, and we're just so grateful for the generosity we've been seeing. Now, this weekend, we are going to be punctuating the last 6 weeks, what we've been kind of tracking on here. If you are here for the first time this weekend, tune in this weekend for the first time, let me just say, you're going to kind of see the heartbeat of what this place has been about, what we've been tracking on. If you dig this, you're like, hey, I'd like to learn more, you can go to crosspointweb.org/watch. That's our watch page, and you can catch up on all the previous weekends. You can download a copy of the guide, or you can pick one up here at the campus. Now, we're going to bring all of our learning together this weekend, and we're going to put together something called a rule of life. And this is kind of a strategy to help us better align ourselves with where we're wanting our lives to go on our spiritual formation. And so, when it comes to life, there's really only 2 things to worry about. Did your grandma teach you this? There's only 2 things to worry about in life? Anybody, grandma teach them that? Yeah, okay, a couple of you, not everybody. Well, if your grandma didn't teach you this, listen to I Am Ken here.
Grandma says there are only 2 things in life that you worry about. Whether you're healthy or whether you're sick. If you're healthy, you ain't got nothing to worry about. But if you're sick, you got 2 things to worry about. Whether you're going to get better, whether you're going to get worse. You get better, you ain't got nothing to worry about. But if you get worse, you got 2 things to worry about. Whether you're going to live, whether you're going to die. If you live, you ain't got nothing to worry about. But if you die, you got 2 things. Whether you're going to heaven, whether you're going to hell. If you go to heaven, you ain't got nothing to worry about. But if you go to hell, you got 2 things to worry about. Original or extra crispy? That's the
Oh, man, come on. Is that not funny? Just a little bit. Yeah. Really, life is that way, though. A lot of times we got 2 decisions, and we have the opportunity to choose which way we go. We're going to make some decisions this week on how we actually continue in the direction that we feel like God's been shaping us and directing us in as we've been going through this journey. Now, one other quick shout out. Early in the journey, on the very early parts of your journal, there was an experience called a spiritual health reflection. And if you did not have the chance to do this, to complete this, you can do this at any time. It's absolutely free. I encourage you to consider this. It's a little inventory, about 40 questions. You can scan this QR code. It'll take you to the website, and it will kind of evaluate, some of the disciplines you've built into your life. It will show you some of the places where there's growth, maybe some of the places that you can focus attention. It's a really, really cool tool, and you can take it ongoing. Like, you can take it every few months, and you can come back and say, okay, how am I growing in some of this? So I think this might be helpful as we kind of put together our rule of life, which we're going to do here. So last 6 weeks, we've been kind of given a vision for what it means to apprentice under the person of Jesus. This weekend, we're going to shift gears a bit, and we're going to really kind of begin to put this plan together to make that transformation a reality. In fact, we've said, transformation is possible. It's just not inevitable. I mean, it doesn't just happen overnight. In fact, we need a plan. And so Pete Scazzero, he's a guy that does a lot of work on emotionally healthy spirituality. He says nurturing a growing spirituality with depth in our present day culture is going to require thoughtful, conscious, and intentional plan for our spiritual lives. And so we all have a plan for the things that we value the most in our lives, right? So like, you have a plan for your money, which is called a budget. You have a plan for your time, which is called your calendar, your schedule. You probably have a plan for your next vacation. You have a plan for, your career. You have a plan for the diet that you're working on. You have a plan for your exercise routine. We plan these things. And I've been around like soccer moms and, baseball dads that like have all these plans to get their kids like to the big leagues, right? To get to the big dance. But they've never thought through, okay, what's my plan to grow my children spiritually? And honestly, I haven't thought about that for ourselves either. What's my plan to grow spiritually? So the question we're going to be looking at is, how do we make a plan to be spiritually formed? We've been exploring a lot of things. We're now going to kind of bring all of that together. And so today I want to introduce us to this concept that goes all the way back to first century followers of Jesus. And it's this thing called a rule of life. All right. And a rule of life really is a schedule and a set of practices that include some relational rhythms. And so what it does is it begins to guide us in a certain way. And it gives us the space to, as we've been kind of pursuing, to spend more and more time with Jesus, to become more and more like Jesus, and then actually be able to do the things that he does, experience the things that he experiences, like peace and joy, and all the things that we see in him that we want more of. And so it's kind of an intentional plan that causes us to slow down. It causes us to be intentionally formed into more of the person of Jesus. And so this kind of rule of life language, this is like very ancient language. It goes all the way back to Jesus' day. And so it may feel a bit strange. It may even be a bit off-putting, like the terminology here. But we're not talking rules for life, right? It's not plural right here. It's singular, rule for life. It's a single thing that begins to guide us in our formation. And so the original word here actually is regula. That's what this whole concept was. Regula is where we get our word like ruler or regulation or regular. A regula was like a straight piece of wood. And so, in fact, some scholars would even say that back in ancient Mediterranean, this was like the word for a trellis, like in a vineyard. And so I want us to take a look at something that Jesus taught one time. In fact, in John 15, he talks his most famous teaching on the vineyard. Here's what he said. He said, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire and burned. If you remain in me, though, and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit. And when he says fruit, he's talking about the fruit of the Spirit, things like joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, self-control, things that you can't just go out and will yourself to, but by spending time with Jesus and becoming an apprentice or a disciple, he says, you are actually showing yourselves to be my disciples. And so, the early Christian teachers, they actually kind of picked up on Jesus' metaphor right here, and they kind of trace this back to a logical conclusion, and they basically said, hey, if we're going to bear much fruit, then what do we need? And so they kind of began to work on this trellis concept. They said, we're going to need a support structure. I mean, we got to help things get off the ground. That's what you do with fruit, right? Any good fruit, you got to steer it in its desired direction, and you have to protect it from disease and predators and all the things that move around the ground. And so in the same way, these theologians, they said, okay, if we're going to abide in the vine of Jesus and we want to bear fruit, if we want to experience those things like joy, peace, patience, goodness, the fruit of the Spirit, then we have to apprentice ourselves similar to a grapevine growing on a trellis. All right, and that support structure is actually what is called the rule of life. Now, another definition or another way to think of the rule of life is that this is a way to schedule into our daily life practices and relational rhythms that align our time and align our habits to our deepest desires. They allow us to actually be more with Jesus and actually continually become more and more like Jesus. And so the motivation behind this, let me just be really clear, it's not duty. It's like, oh gosh, I got to go do this. No, it's actually desire. I mean, think about how any athlete trains themselves, all right? It's all in service to their desire. They know that they have to connect their desires to their discipline to actually get certain outputs. And so apprentices of Jesus, there's three kind of rhythms that we're going to work at putting into place in this rule of life this weekend. The first is our daily practices. And this is going to be things like solitude or spending some time in prayer. The second realm is our weekly practices. So this for you might be something like connecting in community with a friend. It might be going to church. It might be practicing Sabbath. And then we have monthly practices, which could be something like serving the poor or, saying, hey, I'm going to be financially generous. And so there's different levels of practice that we build in to develop this rule of life. Now, in the chaos of our modern life, this is the crazy thing, with all the hurry, with all the digital distraction, with all the cross pressures that you and I face every single day, this kind of rule actually becomes more important than perhaps ever in the history of our lives. And I know for some of us, you might hear this and go, oh man, that sounds so energizing. Like, I love structures like that. Some of you might hate it. You might be going, oh my word, like, kill me now, right? Like, you might be thinking, like, I'm more of the spontaneous type. Like, anytime, maybe you grew up in like a very legalistic culture in your home, all right? And so anytime you hear like rules and this whole idea of like, like putting structure to something, it just like makes you very weary and turned off. Like, I totally get that, all right? So just hang with me for a moment, because here's the reality for all of us. All right, you already have a rule of life, All right, you already have either do things unintentionally or intentionally. So whether it's written or it's unwritten, or whether it's conscious or unconscious, whether it's something that is a wise decision you're making, or you're just kind of foolishly on a whim making a decision, whether it's like some long-term strategy that you have, or maybe some short-term like gratification you're working on, it might be something that is just encouraging, something that's like helping you get to where you want to go, or it might be something that's sabotaging you getting to where you want to go. We all have a rule of life. All right, and you may not have even heard this phrase before. Like up to the last 5 minutes, you may have been like, I've never even heard this before. That's irrelevant. The reality is we all have a rule of life. Like you have a morning routine, all right? You have a way that you do your workday. You have a way that you network with your friends. You have a way that you manage your money. You have a way that you manage your time. These are all things that dictate our rule of life. And so the question isn't like, hey, do I have one? The question is, like, do you know what your rule of life is? And is it getting you to the places that you want to go? Is it working for you, or is it working against you? Because for a lot of us, we're like, man, I just can't figure out how to get closer to God. I feel so distant to God at times. And we're always in a hurry, and we're always rushing, and we feel stuck in our formation. And so the problem isn't that the rule of life isn't working. The problem is that it is, right? The problem is whatever rule we have in place is actually creating the results and the experience that we're having. And so that's our rule. So I want you to hear a story of a guy that is a fascinating guy. And he's going to tell us a little bit about what this has looked like for him. His name's Andy Crouch. He works for Praxis, which is a group that's doing this redemptive entrepreneurship with nonprofits and for-profit groups. He also wrote a book that we referenced a number of months ago. Many of you picked this up. It's called The Tech-Wise Family. And it's kind of a book that helps us understand how to put technology in its place and not let it drive our lives. And so I want you to hear a bit of Andy's story as he began to put this rule of life into place in his life.
I discovered I had a rule of life, an unconscious rule of life, while I was working on this book, The Tech-Wise Family. And it dawned on me, writing this book about technology and family life, that I had an absolutely ironclad practice every single day of walking downstairs when I got up in the morning, and the first thing I did was look at my phone. That's what you do in the morning, right? Look at your phone. And, I'd be making tea, but even before the tea was finished, I'd let the glowing rectangle tell me whatever I needed to pay attention to. All the urgencies, all the outrages, all the demands, all the opportunities. And somehow I had the presence of mind one morning to think this cannot possibly be the best way to start my day, because it would just instantly adrenalate me, So I thought, well, what can I do instead that would be kind of a sufficient counter-discipline to this habit of picking up my phone every day? And I thought, what I ought to do is go outside. So I decided that every day, after making my tea, there's one habit I'm not going to give up, which is tea first. But I'd take my tea outside and just walk out the front door, stand outside just for a few moments, and just experience whatever the day had for me before I turned to the glowing rectangle. And the first 2 weeks that I was trying this, every day was a ridiculous spiritual battle. Like, this is not a complicated thing to do. And yet every morning it was like this phone, I could almost sense like a voice calling to me from the little phone. Don't you need to check me? Don't you want to try me? And I'd have to resist and say, no, get behind me. I'm going outside first. 2 weeks in, I heard the voice, just like the days before, but something absolutely flipped. And instead of feeling temptation and allure, all I felt was revulsion and repulsion. Like, why would I invest in you this most beautiful first moment of my day, rather than go out and be a creature in God's creation? And ever since I've done this, it is one of the most spiritually transformative things I've done with my life, probably in the last 10 years, maybe embarrassingly. Just step outdoors, whatever the weather is, wherever I am in the world. Sometimes I walk down flights and flights of stairs if I'm staying in a hotel or something, and just spend a moment being who I really am, which is a very small part of a very large world, rather than what I am on the screen, which is a very large part of a very small world. And it's been a gift to choose to be who I really am. And that's what our disciplines are for. That's what the real rule is for, is to choose to be who I know I am and want to be.
I love his idea of this little glowing rectangle. Anybody else have a little glowing rectangle? We've been trying to figure out, like, can you be human and own an iPhone at the same time? And we need it, right? But like, how do we maintain our humanness? So here's what we're gonna do for the rest of our time. I'm gonna walk us through what it looks like to craft a rule of life. All right, and these are some things that are gonna be in your guidebook. If you don't have one of these yet, these are at the back along the doors at Connection Point. You can grab one. And if you're tuning online, here's a QR code. You can download a digital copy. And there's examples in the guidebook on pages 53 to 55 on what kind of a rule of life looks like. There's a couple different versions of this. This is what we're gonna be crafting in our personal time this week as our homework. And there's a QR code right here as well that will take you to a rule of life builder. So this will take you to the Practicing the Way website where you can, create a login and you can actually go in and like move things around and plug and play each of the practices and actually kind of play with your rule of life till you get it where you want it to be. Now, let me just say, everything we talk about here is invitational. All right, everything we do here is invitational. All right, we make the recommendations, you make the decisions, right? And that's really how Jesus worked as well. He was like, hey, I'm going to make suggestions. You got to decide if you want to do this or not. But if you're ready to take the next step in your apprenticeship to Jesus, this is going to be a key next step. All right, and so I want to offer you a few tips on how to build your rule of life. All right, and if you're like, man, I'm just not ready to do that, then get that little glowing rectangle out and just hang out for a bit. All right, I'll invite you back in at the end when we get through these tips right here. But here's 6 things I want us to think about as we think about crafting this rule of life this week. Here's number 1. Number 1 is to start small. All right, start small. All right, let's be honest. It's easy. It's so easy to get like overzealous. We're like, oh man, I'm going all in on this. All right, starting big. Let me tell you, that's going to be the number 1 thing that's actually going to lead you to fail in this process. All right, you got to start where you are, not where you believe you should be. It's just so big. In fact, that's what Crosspoint's about. We say it all the time. We're like, hey, we're here to just meet you where you are. We believe God meets us where we are. We oftentimes want to be further ahead. All right, I learned this lesson a number of years ago from one of my daughters. I don't remember where we were going. We were going somewhere. I was walking with her, and I was kind of frustrated because she wasn't keeping up. We were in a hurry. I don't know why we were in a hurry. Obviously, it wasn't a big deal because I can't remember what we were in a hurry for. But I was frustrated with her. She was frustrated with me because she couldn't keep up. And finally, she said, Dad, I'm not as grown up as you. Would you please slow down so I can keep up? And I just remember for the first time in my life, I go, oh my gosh. Yeah, like I'm twice as tall as she is. I'm older than she is, but I'm expecting her to be further along. A lot of times, that was a huge learning for me. Because a lot of times, we want ourselves to be further along. We want other people to be further along. As we think about putting our rule of life together, there's a variety of reasons that we might feel like we're supposed to be further along, but I want you to start with where you are, not where you believe you should be. All right, I want us to find God in the contours of life as we live it right now. Not the life we think we should be living, not the life we used to have, not the life even that, we think that we should have, but what we actually have. All right, just start right there because, and for most of us, that's going to be starting like pretty small. This is what psychologists call tiny habits. And so it's going to be like finding the small, easy, little like joy-filled things that we enjoy like life with God in. And how do we build those into our life? How do we build those little moments in? I mean, yes, absolutely. If you could spend like 60 minutes a day in quietness and solitude and prayer before you get that little glowing triangle out and start, getting bombarded with the news and all the problems at your office and all those things, that would be amazing. But for most of us, we can't do that. I mean, for most of us, it might be saying, okay, I'm going to start with 15 minutes a day before I get that out. Or I'm going to start with 8 minutes or even 3 minutes a day. The key is like, just remember to start small. Now, the second thing that I want us to think about is think subtraction, not addition. All right, we're going to take out more than we're going to put in. All right, less is more. You're going to be tempted as you begin to craft your real life to go, oh man, I got to add this, I got to add that. Not that that's bad, but it's important to be subtracting things. All right, it's important to identify, okay, what am I not going to continue doing? All right, a rule of life isn't about doing more. It's actually about doing less. It's about ruthlessly eliminating hurry from our lives. It doesn't mean we don't have a lot of stuff on our plate. It just means we're going to remove some things so we're not so hurried. All right, third, We have to take a balanced approach. As we put this rule of life together, it's important to, if you look at Jesus' life, you can plot his practices by like 4 access points. So you have the disciplines that you do alone, and then you have the disciplines you do in community, and then you have the disciplines of doing, things like feasting and worship and, service, and then you have the disciplines of not doing, which would be solitude and silence and prayer. And so naturally, you're going to be drawn towards certain ones more than other ones. And not that that's bad, but that's pretty natural. But you're going to want to say, okay, am I balanced in some of the inward and the outward? All right. And so you don't want to be just driven by your personality preferences. But I will say that the next thing I want to say, which is kind of almost like I'm speaking out of this other side of my mouth, is that you need to take account for your personality preferences and your season of life. All right. So work with your personality, not against it. So as you begin to build your rule of life and say, okay, what practices do I want to put in there? For those of us that are introverts, you might say, I need more of the solitude and the quiet things by myself. Make sure you build those in. For those of us that are extroverts, you might go, gosh, I really need to be with people. I'm energized being out and doing things with others. You need to make sure you build those in. So look for balance, but there might be some things you need more of than others. All right, so as you design this rule of life, this kind of guide for how you're going to implement some of these rhythms into your life, you have to pay attention to your personality and your season. All right, just like you do this with your budget or your calendar or relationships, those things change with each new season in your life. All right, the same is true with our rule of life. All right, 5th, there's no formation without repetition. All right, this is a big one right here. Formation is slow. All right, sometimes we're like in an instantaneous culture. We want results right now. And sometimes you're going to be feeling like I'm not doing anything at all, but you're actually growing. A number of years ago, I heard this phrase, and I can't tell you who I heard it from, but they said, hey, the best leaders are readers. And I thought, man, I am not a reader. I need to be a reader. And I realized, I've always thought I'm not a reader. Ever since I was a kid, I'm like, man, I hate reading. I remember back in... I think 6th grade, my mom kind of used that as punishment, reading as punishment. In the summers, we had to take a reading break, and we got in trouble, we had to go read. And so why would I do something for fun that was punishment, right? And I know it was all good intended and stuff, but I just generally, it was too slow for me. And so I remember actually in the 6th grade going to get this book. We had to go to the library and pick a book out. I got Bob Hope's Confessions of a Hooker, just because it sounded sexy and I thought I'd piss her off. And it's actually about his lifelong love affair with golf. I realized it wasn't as exciting as I thought it was going to be. But nonetheless, I read that during the summer. My wife a few years ago said, no, actually, Curt, you are a reader. My wife, her graduate level work has all been in literacy and reading, and she's she does that in our school systems, does a focus on that. And she's like, no, you are a reader. You just don't read the traditional way that most people read. You don't read novels, but you're reading all the time. I'm like, you know what? You're right. I do read all the time. And that kind of empowered me to realize, okay, I do read, and I'm constantly taking information. And that confidence built where I began even saying, I do read books, and I read leadership stuff, and I read, things that are self-help and how to improve. And I've realized, I've got 2 or 3 books going most of the time, but that was something that grew over time. I became a reader over time. And so practices have a cumulative effect on your spiritual formation. It's kind of like Mr. Miyagi and Daniel's son, all right? There's going to be moments where you feel like you're just waxing Mr. Miyagi's car. There's going to be moments where you just feel like you're pounding nails in his dojo edition, but you know what you're doing? You're actually being formed into a karate master. There's going to be moments in your spiritual formation where you're going to feel like, gosh, I'm just starting my day with a little quietness. On the weekend, I practice some Sabbath. I make sure I'm attending, worship services. I'm in a place where I'm getting instructed. But guess what? Over time, you're actually growing and you're apprenticing and you're following of Jesus. So we have to stick with the process. And sometimes it's going to be, slow and mundane. And then finally, the last thing that as you think about putting this rule of life together this week, it's going to be important to do this in community. It's so easy to form this rule of life and go, okay, this is what I'm going to do. All right, I'm going to go do this. This is my plan. Which you have input on that, obviously. But here's the thing: you already have a plan. All right, you already have a rule of life. So it's going to be kind of important for people that are around you to speak into your rule of life a bit. In fact, anything that brings intentionality to our connection with Jesus can be used in our spiritual formation. It's very, very powerful. But understand, historically, back to the 1st century, developing this rule of life was done in community. All right, it was designed to hold a community together. It was designed to have shared rhythms with others speaking into that, and others like helping us shape our spiritual formation. In fact, last weekend we saw, wasn't that cool to see all those baptisms just a moment ago on the screens there? Man, so cool. Here's what I'm going to say. Every time we see those, I always tell our leaders and volunteers, anybody who's a partner around here at Crosspoint, if you serve on a team, if you're a part of financially fueling Crosspoint, whether that's like sitting in a small group back in Upstreet or, greeting people at the front doors, serving coffee, playing in the band, being behind a camera right now, anybody that helps make this place happen as a partner, that when we see these baptisms, that's not just like a cool spiritual moment for that person. I mean, that was like a massive, like, hey, I'm celebrating that I'm moving into a newness of life with Christ. But guess what? That story is a part of your story because these things are all done in community. I mean, your fingerprints, if you're a partner around here, are all over every single one of those stories. See, following a rule of life and sharing that in community, man, it changes things and it actually changes us. For instance, you might build Sabbath, like you may have tried Sabbath and say, hey, I want to begin to build in a few hours every weekend to begin to Sabbath as a regular thing. But maybe the part of community there is not doing that alone. Maybe it's saying, hey, I'm going to kick off my Sabbath with a meal with some of the people in my home or some of my close friends, because that's where it's fun. All right, maybe you want to build in serving in community or serving, on a team, being a volunteer. We have opportunities here at Crosspoint. All of our teams work in community. You might say, hey, I want to spread some cheer initiatives coming. I want to be about serving those that have food insecurity. It's always done best in community. In fact, you can sign up for that. If you're like, hey, I'm looking for opportunities to make a difference in the community, December 14th, when all these meal boxes come back in, there's 2 ways you can serve. One is standing outside with trailers and receiving these boxes as they come back in and get put in the trailers to go out later that day. There's also an opportunity to go out into the community on that afternoon and help deliver these boxes to schools, to deliver these boxes. In some cases, we're going to put them in cars of people that are going directly into their homes. And the beauty of this is it's done in community. So we're not only serving the community and serving the underserved, but what we're also doing is we're having fun in the midst of that. In fact, my kids, they've gone on that distribution trip to the schools nearly every year. It's some of their favorite stories every single year. They love the experience of doing something in our community, but it's in community with others. See, it's always better in community. So this week, you're going to have the chance in your guidebook to actually begin to build a rough draft, and you can log into this life builder, this rule of life builder, and you can begin to play with that. But I encourage you to do it in community. Maybe invite a friend in. Maybe it's somebody in your home. Maybe your small group. You're going to have some time in your small group this week to actually discuss this with your group mates. And so there's samples in your journal. You can kind of see what this looks like. But again, one of the most important parts is going to that rule of life builder, the QR code in your journal, and beginning to assemble this. Now, as you think about doing this week, all right, here's the main thing. This should not feel overwhelming. All right, and again, for most of us, we need to start small. All right, it might be 2 or 3 simple practices. It might just be saying, hey, I'm going to start my day reading the verse of the day or some kind of scripture to start my day in quietness. I'm then going to make sure during the week I have like a connect with a friend over coffee and community. I'm going to plan a few hours of Sabbath rest. I'm going to make sure I hit services over the weekend. That's a beautiful start right there. And you can always add practices as you go, but the most important step is to start, and the best way to get traction is to start small. In fact, novelist Ann Dillard, she said, how we spend our day is, of course, how we spend our lives. What we do with this hour and that one is what we're doing. The schedule that we create, the rule of life we create, defends from chaos and whim. It's the peace and a haven set up in the wreck of time. I mean, if you ever feel like your week is just like, man, I just feel like it's a wreck of time. She says, when we have a rule of life like this, it's a lifeboat on which you find yourself decades later still living. Now, the other thing that I think is really important as we go into this week and we begin to put all this together is to understand that following Jesus is not a formula. All right, it's going to be easy to think, man, if I just get the right formula and I get the right cocktail on my rule of life, everything's going to go well. No, all these things are meant to foster a relationship. All right, a rule of life is really just an intentional way to say, how do I spend more time with Jesus and how do I become more and more like him? I want to kind of wrap up with sharing with you, and I shared this a few weeks ago, I'm gonna give you a little more detail. I came into contact with all of this about 3 years ago when I was going through like one of the deeper, darkest kind of moments professionally in my life, personally in my life. And I came across the book by John Mark Comer, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. My wife actually gave it to me. She said, you need to read this. And I wasn't sure why until I read the first 8 pages. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that is my life right there. And John Mark Comer is a guy that actually developed this whole practicing the way experience we've been on. And for me, that was when I was 48 years old. I mean, it's really only the last 3 years that I've really began to be taking steps into the deeper inner life. I mean, it took me 48 years to get to that place. And so this idea of like spending even more time with Jesus and slowing to start my day, which are practices that I've implemented over the last 3 years, trying to put that glowing rectangle aside, and not getting into my work email and news and social media until I spend time, just some solitude with God. It's so hard. So, sometimes you're like, well, Curt, your job's different than mine. Listen, when I open my email, I've got budget things I got to deal with. I've got personnel issues I got to deal with. I've got things, problems that have, come up that we have to create, solutions to. I mean, every single day, just like probably when you open your email. And so I did like Andy Couch, suggested. I started, saying, hey, I'm going to spend as much time outside as I can in the morning when I start my day. And for me, that started with like 8 to 10 minutes. I mean, that's what I did. And 3 years later, here I am, and I'm spending like 45 minutes, even sometimes an hour to start my day. And listen, every single morning, like one of the things I write in my journal, I'm like, God, I love this time. Like I hope I never lose an excitement for starting my day with this dedicated time. But let me just remind you, it didn't start there. And I use a few devotionals during my time, and those have grown. I use a Liturgy for Ordinary Radicals by Shane Claiborne. I use Jesus Calling, which a good friend of mine, Ben, recommended to me. I use the Verse of the Day in the YouVersion app, which is kind of cool because I want to know what you're reading because many of you use that, and I recommend it a lot, but it can tell you like your streaks. This was kind of cool. I pulled up my streaks today. I've got 128 days straight that I've been in the app doing the Verse of the Day, 95 weeks in a row, and then this kind of blew me away. 313 days so far this year. There's been 317 days this year. So somewhere I've missed 4 days. Maybe I was sick or something. I don't know. I don't get hung up on those days, but I'm like, wow, if you would have told me 3 years ago, Curt, you're going to be spending 45 minutes, 50 minutes to start your day in quietness outside without the glowing rectangle in your hand, and you're going to find great joy in that, I'd be like, you are on crack. I'd be like Curt Walters starts it. Like I start the day going, man. That's the best part of my day. I start the day fast because there's things to do. But I'm telling you, why am I telling you all this? Why am I showing you my stats? Not because I want you to go, oh, wow, Curt, look at you. I want you to see that you can do this. Like it started for me with 8 minutes a day, turned to 12, 15. It was so good, it turned to 20. And I can tell you, this is one of the massive things that creates a stability in this season of my life, and I love it. I love it. I don't know what I'd do if I didn't have that every day. So this week, you have an opportunity to craft this plan. I'm telling you, whatever work you put into it, it's going to benefit you. So I hope you'll get into your journal and you'll begin to pursue that. Now, as we close this weekend, we're going to ground ourselves one last time. We've been doing this all series long in an ancient practice called communion, the Lord's Supper, the Eucharist. And we're going to do a couple things as we do this. We've been trying to change this up each week. And I want to prime the pump a bit on developing our rule of life. In fact, when you came in on your weekly, there's a little slip of paper like this. I want you to go ahead and take that out in your pen. If you didn't get one of these, we've got some on the sides of the room. I'm going to give you a moment to grab one in a moment if you'd like to do that. But I want you to think about something that you want to subtract. All right, what's something perhaps as you exit this journey and you really go into the bigger journey of the rest of your life, what's something you want to leave behind? What's maybe something that, as we've been processing today, if the rule of life's more about identifying things I'm getting rid of than things I'm adding, maybe it's saying, hey, I'm going to get rid of that little glowing rectangle until I start with some solitude. It might be saying there's certain habits or things I do that just don't benefit me that I want to leave behind. Maybe there's some shame. Maybe there's some deep pain or woundedness you continue to wound others out of, and you say, hey, I began to get a healing on that, and I want to leave that behind. We're going to have an experience as we receive the bread and the cup in a moment to also practice leaving things behind. And so you're going to have the opportunity to write something on this piece of paper. Across the front of our platforms over here on both sides, there's some big vases of water. And you can come up and you can drop this piece of paper in those vases. And this is water dissolvable. So you're going to actually literally see it begin dissolving, which is kind of metaphorically what Jesus does to these things that have power over us when we surrender them, as they begin to dissipate and they lose their power over us. And if you didn't get one of these, there's a couple tables on each side. You can just walk up to one of those tables and you can write down something you want to leave. And so we're going to practice leaving, and then we're going to have a couple stations on this right at the corners of the stage where you can come and you can receive the bread and the cup. I mean, Jesus said, whenever you do this practice, I want you to remember me through the breaking of my body, represented by the bread, and the giving of my life source, my blood, through the cup. I want you to remember how good I've been to you. And so this is available to everyone. Anyone who's tracking in the way of Jesus, it says, hey, I want to spend more and more time with Jesus. I want to become more and more like him. He invites us to remember him through this experience. So I'll say it again. We are an invitation. Everything's invitational that we do here. And so you don't have to do this, but this is an action moment. So you can just bring something up and put it in the water on these papers if you want. You can just come and receive the bread and the cup. You can leave something and you can receive something. There's something powerful as we take these steps, because it symbolizes the move that we want God to be doing and is doing in our life. So let's go ahead and stand. I want to pray for us, and we're gonna do this as we sing. God, man, thank you for the invitation. The invitation to not just be with you. I mean, think about that, God. You actually want to be with us, and you invite us to be with you. But you want us to become more like you. You actually want to equip us to experience more and more of the things that you lived and experienced and brought to the world: joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness. God, we want more of that. We've been on a journey. We're all at different places in that, but I just pray in these moments as we leave some things behind and as we receive you, this is another step in our formation, in our direction. And so, God, I just pray that you work in these moments as we symbolize the change, the transformation that's happening and continues to happen. As we bring this journey, this series to a close, we really are just beginning the journey with you. And so, God, we love you. We thank you for what you're doing in our lives. And thank you for calling us to more. And we pray these things in your character. Amen. So as the band leads us, you're welcome to move. This is a moment where we want to invite you. There's papers on the sides if you need one. You can make your way. I'm going to encourage you to go to the outside aisles and up the aisles, and then back across the front and down the center aisles, just so we don't have a traffic jam. We'll be standing here serving the bread and the cup, and so you can participate in any of these moments and just allow God to use these moments to remind you what he's doing in you. So let's sing together as we do this.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Take a moment to follow our podcast on your preferred platform, and be sure to download our app to stay informed on everything happening here at Crosspoint. And if you like what you heard today, don't hesitate to share it with a friend that might need to hear it too.